This science fiction story begins by showing a girl named Reese, who is trapped in a strange room. The room has no visible door to escape, and to make things weirder, there are several telephones placed along the walls. When Reese goes closer to check, she notices that one black telephone has a number written on it. As soon as she picks up the note, the phone suddenly starts ringing. When Reese answers, she hears a recorded message from the other side talking about something called a flush that could save her life. It becomes clear that Reese is trapped in this place for some unknown reason. Confused and desperate, she starts dialing different numbers on the other telephones, but every time, she only hears the same recorded message about the flush. While she keeps trying to figure things out, water suddenly starts flowing from all the telephone receivers, slowly filling the room. Reese realizes that if she doesn't act fast, she might drown. Then, she notices a toilet installed high up on the wall. It makes no sense to her. Why would a toilet be placed there? But recalling the message about the flush and seeing how the water keeps rising, she concludes that if she somehow reaches the toilet and presses the flush, she might be able to drain the water. As the water level rises, Reese struggles but manages to reach the toilet. After inspecting it, she discovers there's no flush attached. Without it, there's no way to release the water. Suddenly, one of the phones starts ringing again, even though she didn't dial it. Taking one last chance, she dives underwater, answers the phone, and finds a broken piece of a flush mechanism inside. She quickly takes it, attaches it to the toilet, and presses it. To her relief, all the water starts draining out, saving her life. But what kind of upside-down world is this? The truth is finally revealed: Reese is inside a simulation. Everything she experienced was part of a high-tech virtual reality game. She's actually a player in an advanced gaming zone where other gamers compete in huge tournaments. Exhausted after completing such a dangerous mission, Reese decides to go home. It's late at night when she arrives. Her father, Chris, is waiting for her. Reese's mother had passed away long ago, and since then, she's lived alone with her father. The two share dinner, talking happily about their day. It's a beautiful example of good parenting, when children openly share their day with their parents. If more parents encouraged this kind of communication, families would grow stronger and happier. But suddenly, an eerie sound spreads throughout the city. Within seconds, all the electricity and the internet go out again, throwing everything into darkness. Reese panics, but her father quickly lights a lantern, bringing a faint glow to the room. Unfortunately, a short circuit has destroyed Reese's only computer, the one she used to play her video games at home. Repairing it would cost a lot of money, and she feels crushed since she was planning to meet her friends again at the gaming zone. Seeing her disappointment, Chris gently tells her that sometimes it's good to take a break from technology. He begins reminiscing about earlier times when people lived without all these modern devices, when they connected with one another and grew closer to nature. But ever since modernization and advanced technology took over, people have stopped talking to each other. Every child in the family is lost in their own little world. In fact, no one even knows what's happening with their neighbors or what's going on in their own city. Everyone is just obsessed with social media and video games, spending their entire day lost in them. Hearing her father's words, Reese begins to realize her own mistake. All this time, she never once asked her father how he was doing or how his health had been. After finishing her studies, she would rush straight to the gaming parlor and spend hours having fun there. It had been a long time since Reese had sat down with her father to talk so openly. Both of them felt happy and peaceful as Chris told her several stories. Eventually, they both fell asleep together on the sofa. Around midnight, strange noises started coming from their old warehouse. Hearing the sounds, Reese woke up immediately. Curious to find out what was happening, she decided not to disturb her father and quietly headed toward the warehouse. The warehouse was very old. It had been built by her grandfather, Frank. Frank was still alive, but he didn't live with them. He stayed alone in the mountains. Reese even had a book written by her grandfather titled Radio Flash. Frank had once been a brilliant scientist who researched electromagnetic radiation and magnetic fields. He had published several research papers that could have been extremely useful in the future. But over time, people forgot about his work completely. No one cared anymore, everyone was too busy chasing modernization. For now, Reese walked into the warehouse, where many of her grandfather's old research tools and experiments were still kept. There had to be a reason why Frank had chosen to live in the mountains, away from everyone else. He must have known something that modern civilization couldn't even imagine. Many people called him crazy because he presented research ideas that others couldn't understand or simply refused to believe. As Reese explored the warehouse, she noticed an old radio sitting in front of her, one that belonged to her grandfather. He had built it many years ago and deliberately kept it there so that his family could contact him if needed. Since there was no cell or internet connection in the mountain range where he lived, this radio was the only way to reach him. Reese quickly grabbed a battery and powered on the radio. She wanted to see if it still worked, and if it did, maybe she could actually talk to her grandfather. The radio frequency had already been set by Frank himself. When Reese turned it on and adjusted a few dials, she was stunned to hear her grandfather's voice come through the static. Hearing him after so long filled Reese with joy. She explained the current situation to him, that all electricity had gone out across the city. But Frank already knew. In fact, he had predicted this exact event years ago. He told his granddaughter that this was an electromagnetic attack coming from outer space, something on a massive scale. And worse, this was only the beginning, even greater dangers were yet to come, ones that could threaten the entire human race. Frank urged Reese to come to the mountain range immediately with her father. He had already made preparations there to survive without relying on modern technology. He gave her a detailed map showing the route to reach him and a walkie-talkie that would automatically connect once they came within his signal range. Reese was the only one who truly believed in her grandfather's research. Everything he had told her made complete sense, and she was convinced they needed to reach him as soon as possible. The next morning, Reese went straight to her father, Chris, and told him everything her grandfather had said. She explained that they had to travel to the mountain range to save their lives, because the situation on Earth was only going to get worse. But when Chris heard all this, he refused to believe it. He told his daughter that her grandfather was crazy, that no one had ever taken his warnings seriously, and that's why he had left everyone to live in the mountains alone. It was clear that Chris didn't respect or trust his father at all. Instead of believing him, he started saying unpleasant things about him. Reese, however, refused to back down. She kept insisting that if her father didn't believe her, he should at least talk to her grandfather once. After a lot of pleading, Chris finally agreed. They went to the warehouse, where the old radio was kept, and tried to make contact. It had been years since Chris had spoken to his father, so when Frank's voice finally came through, it was an emotional moment. Frank calmly explained everything to his son. He told him that the blackout they were experiencing was the result of electromagnetic radiation coming from outer space, filled with dangerous solar waves. Those harmful rays had already knocked out all electricity and internet systems, and soon, things would get even worse. The radiation would start affecting human bodies directly. Frank urged his son to bring Reese and come to him immediately. He had spent years preparing a place in the mountains that was completely self-sufficient, built to survive even if all modern technology failed. He relied on natural resources that would never run out. Frank had long predicted that cities would eventually run out of supplies, leading people to fight each other for food, water, and survival. If Reese wanted to stay alive, they had no choice but to go to him. After hearing everything in such detail, Chris finally agreed. He decided that if his father turned out to be wrong, they could always return to the city, but for now, it was worth the risk. Following the map Frank had given them, Chris and Reese began preparing for their journey. Frank lived far away, high up in the mountain range, so finding him wouldn't be easy. Still, they gathered their supplies, loaded the car, and set out. It had already been a full day since the blackout began, and its effects were now clearly visible everywhere. People were panicking, arguing with police officers, and demanding answers. Rumors were spreading that another country might be preparing to attack. The authorities tried to calm everyone down, assuring them that the government was working on a solution. Meanwhile, Chris and Reese stopped at a supermarket to collect survival supplies. But when they entered, chaos had already broken out. People were looting shelves, hoarding food, and fighting over whatever they could find. It was exactly what Frank had predicted. Chris and Reese managed to gather a few essentials before leaving. They got back into their car and began driving out of the city. Many others were doing the same, realizing that surviving in the city was becoming impossible. The highways and bridges were packed with cars, traffic jams stretched for miles, and several accidents had already occurred. Some people were even pushing abandoned vehicles out of the way just to clear the road. Eventually, Chris managed to find a way through and kept driving toward the mountains. All they had to do now was follow the map and locate Frank's position. Reese, exhausted from everything that had happened, soon fell asleep in the car, leaving her father to keep driving through the long, uncertain night. A few hours later, Reese opened her eyes and realized something was wrong. They had gone off course. The road they were on didn't match the one shown on the map. She tried to warn her father, Chris, but in that moment, his attention slipped from the road. Within seconds, their car veered off track and crashed straight into a tree. Luckily, neither of them was badly injured, but the car was completely wrecked. It was clear that it couldn't be repaired easily, and they were still far from Frank's location. With no other choice, Reese and Chris decided to continue their journey on foot, following the map through the dense forest. Meanwhile, Frank was shown waiting anxiously in his cabin. Based on his calculations, his son and granddaughter should have arrived by now. When they didn't, worry started creeping in, but he couldn't just leave to search for them. All he could do was hope and wait. Back in the forest, Chris and Reese kept walking deeper into the woods. Eventually, it became obvious that Chris was hurt more seriously than he had let on. He had multiple injuries from the crash, but hadn't told his daughter because he didn't want to appear weak. When Reese noticed the blood stains, she realized he was suffering from internal bleeding. His ribs had been damaged in the accident. Without proper medical care, his condition would quickly worsen. Reese supported her father as best she could, though his pace was slowing drastically. In dangerous survival situations like this, especially when someone is injured and there's no medical help nearby, experts recommend using natural survival techniques. The first step is to look for natural resources that can help stop bleeding, such as spider webs. When dried and applied to a wound, spider webs can clot the blood and stop it from flowing. Another useful remedy is the sap from certain trees, particularly pine or spruce. Their thick resin has mild antiseptic properties that help clean wounds and prevent infection. Alternatively, yellow leaves from specific plants can be crushed and applied to promote blood clotting. However, it's vital not to use dirty or contaminated materials, or the wound could become infected. Once the bleeding stops, the wound should be tightly wrapped to protect it from outside contact. Using these simple but effective methods, one can survive even severe injuries in the wild. Despite Reese's efforts, her father's condition kept worsening. His internal bleeding was getting out of control, and soon he couldn't even walk. Struggling to hold back her fear, Reese decided to find help. She ran through the forest, shouting for anyone to hear her. After a long, desperate search, she finally spotted a farmhouse in the distance. Rushing inside, she found an old man working there. His name was Trash. Without hesitation, she begged him for help and led him to her father. Thankfully, Trash was kind and compassionate. He immediately took Chris back to his farmhouse and did everything he could to treat his injuries using the limited supplies he had. He cleaned and bandaged the wounds, but Chris still didn't regain consciousness. The nearest hospital was miles away, and with no internet, no electricity, and no way to contact anyone, there was nothing more they could do. Hours passed, and Chris's condition continued to deteriorate. Despite Reese's prayers and Trash's efforts, Chris eventually succumbed to his injuries. He was gone. Reese broke down completely. She had never imagined this. She and her father had set out to survive, but now he was dead. The old man felt deep sympathy for her. Losing a parent at such a young age was unbearable, and Reese was left utterly heartbroken, all alone in a collapsing world. After much effort, Reese and Trash buried Chris's body with care and held a small funeral right there. Reese was completely shattered, lost in grief and confusion. Seeing her condition, Trash decided out of sheer humanity that he would help her reach her grandfather, Frank. He had an old car, and together they set out, following the map toward Frank's location, unaware of what dangers lay ahead on that road. Meanwhile, Frank was still waiting anxiously for his son and granddaughter. Something felt wrong. By now, they should have arrived. After hours of worry, he finally decided to go out and look for them himself, driving in the opposite direction from where they were supposed to come. While traveling, Frank came across a crashed car. The moment he saw it, his heart sank. It was his son's vehicle. Blood stains on a piece of cloth nearby confirmed his worst fears. Something terrible had happened. Following the trail, Frank continued investigating and eventually reached the old farmhouse where Reese had earlier sought refuge. But when he called out, no one answered. The house was empty. Trash and Reese had already left. Frank stepped inside and immediately noticed bloodstains on the sofa. His suspicions deepened. As he walked outside, he spotted a freshly made coffin. The wood was new, the dirt still unsettled. In that instant, he knew the truth. His son Chris was dead. Heartbroken but determined, Frank swore he would find and protect his granddaughter at any cost. At the same time, Reese was sitting in Trash's car, heading toward her grandfather's location. Suddenly, a man appeared on the road, waving for help. Something about him didn't feel right, and Trash sensed danger. He quickly told Reese to hide in the back compartment of the truck. The stranger approached, pretending to talk normally, but within seconds, he pulled out a gun and shot Trash point blank. Reese froze in terror, hiding silently in the corner. The man threw Trash's body out of the truck and drove away. He was a violent thief who robbed and murdered travelers. Eventually, he drove the truck into a junkyard full of scrap metal and abandoned machinery. Reese was still trapped in the back, terrified and trying to figure out how to escape. Just then, another man appeared, a hunter. He looked strange and menacing. Hearing noises from the truck, he aimed his rifle and, without hesitation, shot the thief dead. Reese gasped in fear. Before she could think, she ran for her life. But the hunter spotted her and chased her through the junkyard. She couldn't get far. He caught her and dragged her to his house, an old, decaying cabin deep in the woods. When Reese regained consciousness, she found herself face to face with a horrifying old woman. The woman sneered and said she had lived there for many years, and the hunter was her son. She told Reese coldly that entering their territory without permission was a crime that came with punishment. It became clear that Reese was now in grave danger. The old woman promised that Reese would pay for breaking their rules. Meanwhile, Frank, still searching tirelessly, came across Trash's body lying on the road. He recognized him immediately from the photograph he had seen earlier at the farmhouse. Realizing what that meant, Frank knew his granddaughter was in serious danger and that he had to find her fast. Back at the cabin, Reese sat trapped as the old woman and her son stood before her. The woman began rambling about her twisted family. Her son, the hunter, was named Billy, and she mentioned another boy, a shy and reclusive one named Quill, who never left his room. It became horrifyingly clear that this was not an ordinary family. They were psychopaths, murderers who took pleasure in torturing and killing anyone who crossed their path. Reese was heartbroken as she told the old woman, "My father is dead. Please, I just need to reach my grandfather. He's on top of that mountain, and I know the way." But the old woman didn't listen to a single word. She coldly said, "You're not going anywhere. Not until we find a use for you." No matter how much Reese pleaded, the old woman spoke to her cruelly, declaring that she would have to live there forever. Scared and helpless, Reese was told to go upstairs and sleep. She obeyed quietly, trembling with fear. As night fell, Reese couldn't stop thinking about escaping. Once everyone was asleep, she carefully got up, found the keys, and unlocked the door. Without looking back, she ran as fast as she could into the dark woods. But the old woman soon realized what had happened. Furious, she sent her son Billy to catch Reese. Billy ran like a wild animal through the forest, and before long, he caught up with her. He knocked her unconscious, tied her up in a sack, and hung her from a tree. Mercy was something this family didn't understand. As punishment, Billy left Reese hanging there all night, without food or water, suffering in silence. Hours later, a bear appeared beneath her, growling hungrily. Its sharp claws scraped at the ground, ready to tear through anything. But Billy was there, watching. He had deliberately used Reese's bait to lure the bear. The moment the animal got close, Billy raised his gun and shot it dead. He then cut Reese down and locked her in his room. For days, she was kept captive, barely fed, growing weaker by the hour. That's when she finally understood what her grandfather used to say, that sometimes only nature itself can help you survive. A whole week passed, and no one came to rescue her. Then one night, the old woman called Reese outside and offered her a cruel deal. "We won't kill you," she said, "if you agree to become Billy's wife and live with us." Reese was horrified. She refused instantly. She could never be part of this insane family. Enraged, the old woman threw her back into the room and locked the door again. Reese didn't know how much longer she could endure or if she'd ever escape. Then one evening, a young man quietly appeared near her room. He seemed shy and nervous. It was Quill, the family's second son, the one who rarely came out of his room. Unlike the others, Quill wasn't a psychopath. He pitied Reese and wanted to help her escape. Late that night, he carefully unlocked her door and led her outside. They crept through the woods together. Quill had decided he no longer wanted to live with his murderous family. But soon Billy realized they were gone. Furious, he grabbed his rifle and began tracking them. Being a hunter, he quickly picked up their trail. As Quill and Reese hurried through the forest, he shared a few berries with her to keep her strength up. He knew his brother would catch up sooner or later, and he was right. Within moments, gunshots echoed through the trees. Billy was firing at them relentlessly. Reese and Quill ran until they reached a massive fallen tree spanning a deep ravine. Balancing carefully, they crossed it one step at a time. At one point, Quill almost slipped, but Reese caught his hand and pulled him to safety. Still, the bullets kept coming. They had to move fast. Eventually, they reached a stream surrounded by rocks and thick vegetation. Billy was close behind. Thinking quickly, Reese and Quill slipped silently into the cold water, submerging themselves completely, hoping the hunter wouldn't see or hear them. But of course, Billy soon realized what had happened and came charging toward them. Quill didn't want anything to happen to Reese, so he confronted his brother to protect her. The two brothers began to fight fiercely, struggling and shouting in the middle of the woods. During the scuffle, Billy's gun fell to the ground and slid toward Reese. She reached for it, but Reese had never handled a weapon before. She wasn't someone who could just take a life. Still, she saw that Billy was about to kill his own brother. Desperate to save Quill, Reese finally picked up the gun and pointed it at Billy. Just then, a loud gunshot echoed through the forest. Billy fell to the ground, dead. But the bullet hadn't come from Reese, it was fired by her grandfather, Frank, who had just arrived in time. Seeing his granddaughter alive filled him with overwhelming relief and joy. Frank rushed over and embraced Reese. Together, he and Quill took her back to his mountain farmhouse, hidden deep within the range. Everything there was natural, no electricity, no modern machines, just self-sustaining life built from the earth itself. Far from the chaos of the city, they lived peacefully. Quill, now recovering from his injuries, brought good news one day. The internet was slowly being restored, and the world was beginning to recover. But Reese had no desire to return. Her home, her safety, and her family were now with her grandfather. It was clear now, nature, the very force that gives us life, is also what ultimately saves us. And with that, this thrilling and emotional story comes to an end.